Well, greetings and salutations, everyone, and welcome back to tonight's second half. Before we jump into it, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon and PayPal are in the description below. The merch is displayed directly under this video. Also, Dogman, Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, the links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, folks, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost you a cent. Click that like button. It takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative and exciting uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon. And finally, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all these things, they really do help. And folks, they definitely matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump into tonight's second half, shall we? Briefly, before we get into tonight's second half, if you are subscribed, and I hope all of you are, because like I said, it does not cost you a cent, and you have clicked the bell icon to get notification, please check your bell icon to make sure that it is not turned off. I've noticed that uploads that I've been putting out are getting less notifications sent out. I don't know why that is. YouTube and Google have not mastered the system. Every once in a while there is a glitch, and for some reason people get unsubscribed and the notification bell gets turned off. So please check that bell icon to make sure that you are getting notifications. It is noticeable. I can see it. And guys, 64% of the views on my channel are from people who are not subscribed. Doesn't cost you a cent, guys. All you need to do is subscribe. I really would like to hit 100,000. I've been doing this for almost 6 years, and it really would mean a lot to me if you would. So let's get into tonight's horrifying second half. Sorry for taking some of your time. Tonight's second half is jam-packed full of terrifying encounters and a video that I have watched probably 100 different times. I first shared the video a while back, and I have been looking at it in different light, different frames, slowing it down, speeding it up, and the video is from a resident that lives in America, so it cannot be a monkey, baboon. It is actually, you can see it, it is canine. And if I were a betting man, I would say this is probably one of the clearest videos of a Dogman. I don't like saying 100%, so I'm going to say about 85%. I truly believe this is a real photograph, or a real video, of a Dogman. Here that is. Today's first encounter. It was the evening when I was driving from my house to the local Walmart. I drove around a bend that was maybe an eighth of a mile from my house. I was driving slowly because people tend to fly through that road from a connecting lane and get into accidents. It was overcast, but not dark yet. I glanced to the side of the road. I always scan that area because random things keep getting dumped there, and occasionally a discarded pet that'll need to be rescued. I was about 6 to 7 feet away from what I saw. At first I thought, oh, a fox, but then immediately recalculated due to the size, almost like my brain was trying to figure out what I was looking at. And then thought, a man in a wolf costume? It was lying on its side and sort of propped itself up. I got a very good look at it as I stopped my car and stared. It was reddish-brown and had canid features, and was covered in fur, but the proportions were human-like. It was at least 7 feet tall, maybe more. I made eye contact with it, and it me. And it was like it grinned at me. Its jaw opened, and I saw sharp incisors and rows of sharp teeth. I was close enough that I could see muscle movement in its face and jaw when it did that. That's the part where I slowly started the car and thought, that's not a human. It kept eye contact with me as I drove around the bend until I was out of view. It was almost as if it was saying, I know you see me and I see you too. It didn't seem aggressive or angry, almost like it was amused. My coping mechanism for what I call crazy crap is to go emotionally numb and, like a robot, focus on the immediate task. So that day I kept driving and I got the items I needed from the store. Almost like I was in low-level shock. When I drove back, the creature wasn't there anymore. I didn't feel the fear that some people have described, but there was an awareness that this was a predator above the human step in the food pyramid, which is unsettling. I also didn't get the vibe that it wanted to harm me or was going to harm me, but that if I tried to attack it, I would regret it. After the initial shock wore off, I've been trying to find more info on what this was, and I have found very little. It's been 2 years, and I haven't seen it since. Random other paranormal things before and after, but unrelated to this, it seems. Tonight's second encounter. I live in the northeastern part of Pennsylvania, in rural Monroe County in the Poconos. I have a bipedal wolf experience. This occurrence was on September 3rd, 1975. I now own the property, and I still live there. My dad and I were traveling in the family station wagon on a dirt road on our property. When we first saw this creature, it had come out of the heavy woods and crossed the road while on all fours. We stopped the car and watched it. When it reached the north boundary of our field, it stood up on its hind legs. It tried to hide between 2 mulberry trees. Its head touched a branch that was approximately 12 feet from the ground. My dad would later measure its height. It then ran south, dropping down onto all fours. It was running at an unbelievable speed. It covered 100+ yards and ran out of the southern boundary of our field into the road directly in front of us. From its nose to the tip of its tail, it covered the county road from shoulder to shoulder, approximately 18 feet. Its left shoulder was about 1 foot above the center of the hood of our car. When measured, it was 3 feet off the ground, putting its left shoulder at approximately 4 feet tall. As it ran in front of us crossing the road, it turned its head towards us and snarled, showing all of its teeth, including the canines that were at least 6 inches long. It had huge amber eyes and looked just plain evil. The neighbor who owned the woods where the creature had come out of had about 12 guard dogs. He lived alone. We called him Mr. H. He owned about 100 acres, which included several long retired slate quarry holes that were all filled in with clear blue water and huge fish. The woods were also full of deer. By the way, our newly built home was about 50 yards west of where it ran south across the road. A few nights after the incident, at about 1 a.m, all hell broke loose. We could hear the neighbor's guard dogs fighting, madly yelping and being slaughtered. Mr. H opened up with a 12 gauge and kept firing. We would later find out that 9 of his 12 guard dogs were killed. Our area was under Pennsylvania State Police jurisdiction. There was no local sheriff or police force. Several troopers showed up that night. Then at daybreak, a tactical team arrived in a helicopter. They landed in our field. My dad worked the 3rd shift at the time at Ingersoll and Rand and was just getting home. My dad immediately walked up to Mr. H's property. He crossed our field and then directly up his driveway. The state police refused to let him go any further. My mom was so scared of the ordeal that we had heard the previous night. She decided to keep us home from school. Shortly after I saw my dad disappear up Mr. H's driveway, small arm fire erupted. We're all looking out the kitchen window in anticipation of the results. The state police helicopter took off and hovered over Mr. H's property. It then dipped very low and then lifted something huge wrapped in a tarp with a cargo net around it. My dad soon returned and told us that the state police told him to forget about what he had seen. The barracks commander stopped him on his way out to reinforce this. We pestered my dad to tell us what they had shot and killed. This was the only time I've ever seen fear in my dad's eyes. All he said was he saw them shoot and kill an extremely large wolf. He never spoke of the incident again, nor would he acknowledge my inquiries about it. I eavesdropped on him and my mom talking about it after we kids were supposed to be asleep. He said that there were 9 dead guard dogs and 12-gauge shotgun shells everywhere. By the next night, there was a loaded 12-gauge shotgun at every entrance of the door with double-aught buck. My mom had a new handgun at the ready. My dad got off of night shift very soon after this incident. There's been no other incidents with this bipedal wolf in our area since. Alright guys, like I said, some very compelling video evidence of what I believe to be a Dogman 100%. The sound I removed because there is a lot of explicit words spoken. The first kind of thing, he looks out the window and says, "What is that? What the F is that?" And then keeps saying it probably 2 to 3 more times. And then he zooms in and says it one last time before the small video clip ends. I will play it multiple times so you can see it. You can clearly see its eyes. You can see a silhouette of its face with the tall upright ears going straight up into the air. It's obviously huge, just judging from the distance. He's not right on top of it. He has to zoom in with his camera phone. So here is that video footage. Check it out. It's very compelling. Like I said, some very chilling and compelling video evidence of Dogman doing what they do best, it seems, and peep. You can see clearly if you look at the eyes and you focus on this video clip. And I encourage you guys, watch it on your phone, watch it on a tablet, watch it on your screen, your big screen of your computer. Probably the best would be a tablet or the computer screen, because you really can make out a very distinct German Shepherd or wolf-like face. To me, this is very compelling and real evidence that dogmen are here. It really solidifies what I saw back in 1994. And this is evidence that I've been looking for. I mean, we all want it, right? Well, I wish it was a little longer, and I wish it was daytime, but you can't always get everything that you wish for. On to tonight's third encounter. My experience happened in Sarasota, Florida, the late 80s. Summertime, roughly 9 p.m. It was just getting dark. I was on the back patio, and at the time no one had fences around their property, because we all knew each other's families around the area. The only exception was the family across the street from us. They had a 7-foot-tall cinder block wall behind their house. They had a large wooded piece of property and kept equipment out there. The dad was in construction, and the wall enclosed 3 sides of the property. It was hot out, and a slight breeze, no clouds, starry. As I sat there, you could hear the dogs in the neighborhood begin to bark. Then everything got quiet. A lone howl started, so I howled back. I do it rather well. I'd watch Nat Geo, and I'd mimic wolf cries. Anyway, this went on for a couple of minutes. Each time the howl from the other end got closer. Down the road are train tracks that run north to south. The sound seemed to come from that direction. I started to get spooked as the howling had stopped. Our yards had bushes and trees on the side from where the sound was coming from. The hair on my arms and the back of my neck started to stand up, so I felt I should go in. As I stood, I heard movement from the brush. I glanced over and saw something move. I didn't wait to see what it was. I booked it into the house, and I stood by the door, which had glass panes in it. I watched something very large and dark move about in the brush. It moved away, and I could no longer see it from my vantage point. I went to the front porch to look out the windows, hoping to get a look at whatever was out there, but it never came out that way. So I went to bed, and I read for a little bit to calm down. I'd say about a half an hour later, my brother comes home. He comes right into my room, white as a sheet of paper and shaking all over. His eyes are just huge. I ask him, "Are you okay?" Now, my brother's the sort of person that has an explanation for anything unusual. He's a big guy, so for him to be in this state is not normal. He said, "I need you to come with me right now. I'll explain when we get in the truck." I was still dressed, so I got up and went with him. When we got outside, I asked, "What's going on?" He told me there's something in the road by the tracks. He needed to show me first. I was not happy about this, that as I had just had my own experience with something from that way. As we got there, I looked as if something had exploded all over the road. There was blood everywhere, as if something was mowed down right in that spot. But there were no body parts anywhere. My brother relayed then what he had seen coming down the road. I was coming home, and as I got closer to the tracks, there was this huge thing lying in the road. I thought it must have been a mastiff or a Great Dane in the road, but as I pulled up to it, it didn't look like a dog I had ever seen. It was hairy. Its head and nose were twice the size of a dog. The body was not a dog, just dog-like, much bigger. It was all over the place. There was an arm on the road. Not a dog with a human arm. There was no trace of anything when we got there, and it was only minutes that it took us to get there. I said, "Get the hell out of here now," and we went back home. I told him what I had experienced just before he had gotten home. A couple days later, my sister came to me and said she had been seeing a large dog prowling around at night. It was huge, and she had seen it across the street. As she sat on the porch, I told her what my brother and I had seen, and not to be outside alone until we find out what's going on. We got together and decided to stake out the yard over the next night. Sure enough, it was back in the neighbor's yard. This thing was about the size of a Shetland pony, color and black. We had flashlights and turned them on. It took off over the back wall behind that house. Their dog was going off like crazy. They had a small terrier. We watched this dog thing scale the wall. My neighbor came out to see what was going on, and we shouted there's something in his yard. He went back in and grabbed his pistol and went back, but by the time he had gotten outside, it was gone. We've never had any issues or seen anything since. Tonight's fourth encounter. This took place in my hometown of Vernon, New Jersey, 2009. The town is near the northern tip of New Jersey in the Appalachian Mountains, and it borders New York State. I was 17 at the time and at a party at my friend's house. The town is very large and divided up into different communities, most lake-based, but one of my friend's house was called the Old Orchard. It was more development-like than typical neighborhood, but was up a steep hill with lots of woods around it. It was summer evening, so we spent time outside in their backyard. Some people were drinking, but myself and the other witness were not. The backyard had a thin tree line dividing it from the lot behind it. With no leaves on the trees, it was thick enough to block your view from the yard. Well, after dark, I went out to the tree line into the next lot with somebody. We walked a few steps through the trees, and they sat with their backs to the tree line facing the lot, which was a large upward-sloping hill with a single tree in the center, maybe 100 yards from us. The lot was bordered on the right by a road with a street light that partially illuminated the area, and to the left there were similar tree lines bordering other properties. After sitting and talking for a while, we both felt quiet when we heard something. It was just for a moment, but it sounded like sniffing, like the sound a dog makes with its nose to the ground searching for something. I was facing the tree line bordering my friend's backyard. We could clearly hear everyone in the yard carrying on only feet away. The sniffing sound didn't continue. I glanced around behind me into the lot and saw nothing, and we continued to talk. To preface the rest of the experience, I want to note that northern New Jersey has a very large bear population, and in my town it's very common to see them in your yard crossing the road or even have them break into your home in search of food. Combine that with being someone who spent a lot of time outside and in the woods, I know what black bears look like and how they move and sound. And I know what other large predators are in the area, and what I saw was none of these things. So some time passes, long enough to forget about that phantom sniffing, and then we hear it again. The other person does as well this time. It's the same nose to the ground sniffing out prey type of sound, and it's loud and seemingly coming from everywhere around us. We can still hear the party going on, and as loud as the sniffing is, they don't seem to notice it. I look at the person I'm with, and they're frozen, with their eyes locked on something ahead of them. I turn and face into the lot as the sniffing continues, and under a tree, I see a dark silhouette of something. It was shaped like a bear, but larger, standing about 6 feet on all fours. Its head's down to the ground, and the sniffing all around the tree. But it still makes no sense that we'd be able to hear it from all the way from where we were. It was definitely loud. Then it moves forward, and that's when I am certain that it's not an animal I'm familiar with, because it puts its 2 front legs out first, and then its back legs shuffle forward in one motion like a rabbit or a kangaroo. I didn't watch for very long, but enough to see that it kept shuffling forward like that for a few more times, the whole time its head is to the ground, sniffing as loud as it is breathing in our ears. Again, it's only bright enough to see the silhouette, but it appeared to have fur. I had a strong feeling that it could feel me looking at it, and if I kept watching it, it would notice me, and I did not want that to happen. The person I was with locked eyes with me. We grabbed each other's hands and bolted back to our friend's yard. No one else noticed. Most were too drunk to even know we had gone. It was late. I convinced some people to go inside into the living room and sleep. Other people stayed out in the yard in their tents. But no one mentioned anything weird the next morning. We didn't tell anyone what had happened during the party. The reason the other witness is someone and not a friend is because they were really just an acquaintance I had met. I was trying to hook up with him. I never saw them again. I didn't even know their last name. I want to contact them and ask them about it, and we didn't speak of it to each other at the party. Northern New Jersey is supposed to have a Bigfoot-type cryptid called Big Red Eye, and the Jersey Devil, of course, but I don't really think it fits. I had shared this with a forum once before, and I was told that it was a Dogman, but I don't really know. I've had paranormal experiences in my life. This is the only cryptid type I've ever had. Alright guys, one last time, let's check this very creepy video footage out. Just really look at the eyes and look at how the dimensions of its face looks. You can see an ear. You really can make it out. You just gotta watch it. Alright, once again, there it is. There is no denying that that is not a person. That's clearly some sort of animal. And judging from the looks of the layout, it looks like to be like a balcony they're looking out of. This canine-like creature could be in a tree, or it could be standing on the ground. I'm not really sure. All I know is what I have kind of formulated a theory or an opinion, I guess. Yeah, an opinion based just off of this very short video clip. I've watched this video clip probably 1,000 times before making this video. So I'm leaving it up to you guys, but I'm standing strong that this is probably some really good footage of a Dogman. On to tonight's final encounter. Funny that I had just talked about a person from New Jersey, Paul Pedersen Jr. Super great guy, and he and I had talked a lot before we had done our interview together, and we were talking a little bit about the Big Red Eye, which I believe to be a Dogman. He has studied the Jersey Devil in the Pine Barrens and its legends around the Pine Barrens. He actually is thinking that a lot of the so-called sightings of the Jersey Devil are Dogman related. So, very cool. Now, here is another very creepy red-eyed cryptid encounter. I grew up in the countryside of northern Indiana. This encounter happened in my 7th grade. We had a trash pile where we burned our garbage, and my mom had me take out the garbage bag at around 10 p.m. I grew up in the woods around our house, and I was not afraid of the dark, so I didn't have a reason to hallucinate or see shapes in the dark as a kid. I had never been afraid of the dark up until this point. I took the bag out, walked the short distance down the road to the trash pile. I was about to throw the garbage on top before I saw something standing about a car's length away from the pile. Whatever this thing was, it towered over me. It was tall for someone around my age, being 13. This thing loomed over me. It had to have been over 10 feet tall. We just stared at each other for a long time, and that's when I noticed that it was dark midnight fur and bright red, almost glowing eyes. I was frozen. Then it just turned and stomped back into the woods. It was very fast, and to me, the weight of this thing making the ground shake. I screamed, dropped the bag, and ran as fast as I could to the house. My mom saw that I was acting like I was in shock. I could hardly breathe. My mom was tuned out most of the time, but also depressed to even notice her kids. My state of mind obviously disturbed her enough to come in and check on me. I told her what had happened, and she let me stay home from school the rest of the week. Fast forward 5 years later, I'm living with my aunt because the situation with my depressed mom got bad and I had to move. One night, my aunt had friends over of the family, and I heard the conversation that piqued my interest. My aunt was telling our family friend about seeing a pair of glowing red eyes staring at her from a 10-foot-high window in the trailer. One of those weird small windows that are at the top of the bathroom. The same height I saw this tall man-beast thing. I told her what happened to me and her jaw just dropped. This was probably the most satisfying thing that had happened to me. Hearing it from another person made my experience feel authentic. It made me think that I was not crazy anymore. All right, guys, we are coming up on tonight's live stream. The clock is ticking. It's getting closer and closer to that midnight hour. Looking forward to it. I hope you guys are. I hope to see all of you in the live stream. It really is a blast. So with that, stay safe, happy, healthy. Keep an eye on your children, your pets, loved ones. These things are real. And they are watching us. Everyone, thank you for all your support and God bless.